jobs in Ireland. It was, some years back, we were seeing that influx from Central Europe and Eastern Europe. Today, what you're seeing is that influx of young, tech-savvy people from France, from Spain, from Italy. And when I'm in Silicon Valley, and I've been there myself and with the Taoiseach and in various combinations, and what we hear again and again from the multinationals there is we love the talent in Ireland. We love the Irish talent, and we are amazed at the breadth of talent that is now available to us in Ireland from so many European countries. And then I mentioned the tech and the track record, and I think they speak for themselves because, again, I'm sure you'll be fairly familiar with this, but practically all the top pharma companies, the top ICT companies, the medtech, which is such a strong sector for us, they're all there, and they are our best ambassadors often. The IDA constantly, when we're attracting new investment, we invite the potential investor to go and talk to the companies who are already there. And go and do it privately, not with us listening and them having to say the right things. Go and talk to them. And again, that proves to be the best advocacy is on the part of the companies who are already there. Beyond those two factors that I mentioned, our exports and our FDI, there are other drivers, obviously. As I said, domestic demand is definitely improving, consumer confidence is back, and there are also, I hate to talk about any kind of silver lining to an experience that was as tough as the austerity, but if you can talk about silver lining, what it has proved to be is that fact that our competitiveness has so much improved over the last few years. The labour costs and other business costs have come well down, and that's obviously adding to our competitiveness. So I do think it's fair to say that this isn't just a kind of Pollyanna-ish optimism about the future. It's a well-based confidence in where we're going. But obviously, having said that, it's not my business, and I wouldn't try to do it. I wouldn't try to airbrush any of the risks and the challenges that are still undoubtedly out there for us as we move forward. And maybe the first of those that I would identify is what you might call the political or psychological challenges for the government. Because there's no doubt that austerity fatigue has set in Ireland. People feel they've had enough. They have had to make so many sacrifices. There's been so much additional taxation. There has been cutbacks in public expenditure. It has been very painful for people to go through the austerity of the last few years. And there is absolutely no point in disguising that. People, like I said, are at a point where they feel that their forbearance is exhausted in this regard. And that, of course, creates a very serious dilemma for the government because, yes, we are recovering. We're well on the way to a strong recovery. And, of course, people, when they hear that, they think, well, we want to share in the fruits of this recovery. But even if our finances are under control and the deficit is way down, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, there is no question we still have a high level of debt, the underlying debt in Ireland, dating from the bailout and the banks and so on. That is very high. And so we have to, obviously, be responsible, and the government has to continue to craft policies that will meet that debt overhang. So trying to adjudicate between the demands of people to see the fruits of the recovery and to continue to act responsibly to deal with our underlying debt, it's quite a difficult dilemma that the government is going to have to handle very carefully over the period ahead. The second thing that I would point to in terms of risks and so on is the uncertainty surrounding developments in the Eurozone and in Europe more generally. Now, as I said a minute ago, the Irish economy is to a degree protected because so much of our economic connection is to the US and the United Kingdom, and those are markets that are doing relatively well, and of course the UK is outside the Eurozone. But that's not to say that we are in any way inured from the difficulties and the risks of what's happening on the European scene. We're, of course, a very loyal and a very committed member of the European Union. We are part of the common currency. and we still have significant export markets in mainland Europe. And Europe simply has to get growing again. I mean, that is fundamentally important. And we are very much involved in that conversation, and there's a lot of hope reposed in the new EU Commission. All eyes, obviously, are currently on Greece, and we're waiting to see how this particular Greek drama is going to play out. I have to say that one of the most positive things for Ireland is that it has become almost redundant in this crisis for us to have to keep pointing out we are not Greece, because that is so self-evident. Everybody completely understands that. And, you know, that's certainly a happier situation to be in than if we were having to explain in detail to people how our circumstances are different from Greece. But of course, we're a very concerned European partner. We're there at the table for all these discussions within the Eurozone and the discussions within the European Council. We're a very active participant in those discussions, and the European Council, as some of you may have seen in today's news, the discussions yesterday seem to have gone pretty well. And I was just discussing this with Wilbur Ross here, who would have a very keen eye on what's happening there and a very practiced eye, and we were both agreeing that the risk of the worst happening has probably been averted, and hopefully the path is now set for some kind of accommodation. Third risk to which we have to pay attention, of course, is staying ahead of the competition in terms of FDI attraction. It's a tough market out there. You're just as good as your performance today. Can't rest on your laurels from yesterday. So we just have to make sure that every aspect of our FDI package stays best in class. So just to summarise on this part, economic renaissance, yes, as I said, I think it's a fully justified term. We're back on our feet. We're facing the future with confidence. And I think we can take a degree of legitimate pride in the fact that we have prevailed, we've come through, and we have shown our underlying strengths. But there is not absolutely the slightest basis for any complacency on our part. We need to be focused and purposeful, and indeed tempered by the experience of the past few years, because it would be absolutely, not just would it be heartbreaking, but it would be unforgivable if we were to repeat the mistakes that led us to the circumstances of 2008. Now, just before I finish, I just want to say maybe a quick word about the Irish-US relationship in all of this. And I think it's true to say that, and it has happened so often in our history, but again, during the last years, it's important to say that the economic relationship with the US has really been one of the drivers of our recovery. And again, this isn't an audience where I need to spell it out in any detail, because this audience is certainly, Irish-US Council is very informed and literate about the Irish-US economic relationship. That's your business. But again, it's important, I think, to remind ourselves that, you know, the United States, it's our most important market for export of goods. It's our biggest partner in the export and import of services. We're a big taker of services from the United States. But the trading relationship with the United States is extraordinarily important. And it is probably only outmatched by the FDI importance of the United States. Over 70% of our FDI comes from the United States. And that's an extraordinary figure when you think about it. And it is some of the highest quality FDI that comes into Ireland is from the United States, creating the most jobs and the best jobs. And in so many other ways as well. I was talking to a tour operator here before lunch, and we were talking about the strength of the tourism market in the United States. It is the fastest growing market for tourism, and many of you, I'm sure, are contributing to all of that. Tourism, high-end tourism, medium band tourism, it's all doing so well. And again, of course, the weak euro is going to help that. So all of this good news on the economic front with the United States, of course, you know, nobody is attributing that for a second to sentiment or to anything like that. Exports are happening, the trade is happening because we have the right companies and the right entrepreneurs. FDI is coming because we offer the right package. So all of these decisions are based on, hard market realities. It's not because the colour of our hair or the colour of our eyes or anything like that that people are going to cut us any slack on the economic front. But having said that, I know from my experience as ambassador, that economic opportunities happen through connection, facilitation, people like yourselves who know others. Again, Wilbur, the fact that you came in and you were ready to be there as a kind of an advocate and an ambassador for Ireland, when that comes from people like Wilbur, like many of you in the room, people who make tough business decisions and are, you're combining a certain rapport and sense of connection with Ireland, but most of all, you're combining that with a credibility and reputation, business reputation. It is very, very powerful. So I do want to take the time to say thanks for people who have helped to make those connections in so many different ways, and to tell you that it mattered, particularly through the toughest of years that we've been through, that the US and the Irish business community in the United States and Irish American business was there to act as a kind of people who gave testimonials to Ireland and who were looking out for us and having our back in many ways. So I think I should finish up, perhaps just say again, the diaspora, it's our greatest strength. It's an extraordinary reservoir of passion and connection. The diaspora we have, it's the envy of so many other countries. I meet so many of my fellow ambassadors and they envy me. This extraordinary passion and connection of almost 40 million Irish Americans. And so there is, and just as I finish then, I want to talk for just one moment about that pride and connection and how it's going to be manifest next year. Because next year, 2016, will be really a landmark year for Ireland. I know many of you are more than familiar with Irish history. And you'll know that next year is the centenary of the rising of Easter 1916, which led a few years later to Irish independence. It was really the seminal event in the path that led to Irish independence. And it's going to be celebrated back in Ireland with a great deal of pride. And I have been very anxious that it would be celebrated properly in the United States and in Irish America. True to the origin of what happened in 1916, of course, and honouring that and interrogating that, but also celebrating the journey, the 100-year journey. And so we're going to have events all over the United States, and our flagship event is going to be a big festival at the Kennedy Centre, a 3-week festival next year. And the Kennedy Centre, I think, has supplied some material about that that's available to all of you today. So I hope people will come in behind this and that I will be able to see